A warm hello to the Costa family and to all directors of the Anthony Costa Foundation. My name is Zoe Waters and I'm the Executive Director of the Bowen Health Foundation. And just last week, our very own Francis Traynor, our Philanthropy Manager here at the Foundation, and of course, the inaugural Director of the Adrian Costa Clinical Trials Centre, Paul Lightfoot, hosted a webinar update to provide an insight to our community about the wonderful advancements happening within clinical trials with thanks to you. What follows is a few snippets from our webinar, which may be of great interest to you. I hope you enjoy.
Now let's have a chat with Paul Lightfoot. Now, Paul, you're Director of the Adrian Costa Clinical Trials Centre. So we've said before the totally unimaginable scenario of a parallel Geelong universe that didn't have the Costa family involved. I mean, their contribution to the arts, sport, health, and so many other wonderful local causes is nothing short of extraordinary. And this may well be their very best and most important contribution, in our opinion. Simply, what is the Adrian Costa Clinical Trials Centre?
Yeah. So the Adrian Costa Clinical Trials Centre is a newly being established clinical trials centre to provide new treatments and interventions for the greater Geelong region. It's both a service and a facility, so there's something which is going to be built, which will be a physical location for researchers and participants to attend. And it's also a service as well, which will provide a means for people in the greater Geelong and greater Southwest region to access new treatments where they wouldn't normally be able to have those sort of treatments and interventions overall. So, for example, if someone has normal standard healthcare and it isn't working for them, the ordinary drugs aren't working, then we hopefully will be able to provide other options for people. Not everyone, but it'll be something, at least some form of hope for people where perhaps it didn't exist for people in the region previously. That's it at its most fundamental. We will be able to provide more and better clinical trials, new treatments for people across the greater Geelong region. And that's essentially what the service is.
There are clinical trials already underway. In fact, I knew that 10 months or so ago we were doing trials for a COVID vaccine. How many trials are currently in the process?
So, the Adrian Costa Clinical Trials Centre will build on the existing strengths of Bowen Health in clinical trials. So it's not just starting, this isn't a brand new landscape. There's not been any trials, like it's not a place where there's been no trials previously. In the last year, there were approximately 200 clinical trials conducted across Bowen Health and Deakin. That compares quite favourably with large metropolitan hospitals. Not to name names, but it's actually more than some of the larger well-known metropolitan hospitals. So there are definitely areas of existing strength in the way that clinical trials are conducted across Bowen Health and the greater Southwest region. There are 10 very active trial groups already existing in areas like mental health, obviously, that's already been mentioned, which is a particular strength. Oncology, endocrine, vaccines that you just mentioned. The largest recruiting vaccine trial in Australia for COVID vaccines was conducted at Geelong. So that's an important consideration when you think about that. There's, great research being done in anaesthetics, in intensive care. Orthopaedics is a particular strength through the B Corps group. Paediatrics is a very strong research area in Bowen Health because people are able to look at things right from the start, right from birth all the way through the whole lifespan. And paediatric research needs that sort of exposure in order to do it. And the research director at Bowen Health is a paediatrician. So that just shows what sort of focus there is on that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
There's neurology and palliative care research as well. There's lots of existing ones. But at the same time, we of course want to move into other areas that aren't currently being looked at.
So we're covering most of the areas of medicine, I'd imagine. Would you have any figures on the number of participants that are currently involved in clinical trials at Bowen Health?
So I've only been here a bit over 2 months, and one of the things I'm trying to do is determine exactly how many participants have been treated in clinical trials right across Barwon Health. So I can't give you an exact figure at the moment because that survey has never been done before, but it's in the many thousands.
Right.
Yeah, it's in a lot of cases, particularly oncology, clinical trials are a pretty standard form of treatment, and oncology clinical trial centres will involve up to 1/3 of all their patients taking part in a clinical trial. So it's a really big and important part of the way people are treated.
Yeah. What do you hope to achieve in the short and longer term?
So in the short term, the first thing we've got to do is actually build the facility. Barwon Health have allocated us a space, and the very generous donation from the Costas allows us to build it. We're going to put it into an area which is already fairly well set up. So it's really a renovation as much as building. So it's not a new building from scratch. So building in the next 6 months or renovation in the next 6 months to get the new facility up and running is a really important part of it. Also short term, we have to try and attract as many new clinical trials as possible, because the lead-in time to start new trials takes quite a long time. It can take 6 months to a year at times to get new trials up and running. So we have to start now if we're going to promote a proper service for clinical trials across the greater Barwon region. So at the moment, I've got 10 new trials in startup at the moment that we've already established. So short term, more trials, better trials, and a facility. Longer term, we want to establish a first-class service like comparable to anything in Australia for the greater Geelong region. We want to be able to establish early phase trials. We want to expand and create new teams in areas we haven't looked at already. We want to provide a pathway for local researchers, especially from Deakin, to do good clinical trial research in the region without having to go elsewhere. And classically, really talented researchers, scientists, doctors, nurses will often go as far away as Europe and America in order to end up doing research. It'd be great if just a few of them could stay here instead. That would be marvellous. That'd be really cool. So that's a longer term goal as well. We want to improve the way that people think about Barwon Health when they want to do research. So rather than automatically think, oh, I might go and do research in Melbourne or Sydney and not really think about anywhere else. We want people to go, okay, we should really be going to Geelong to do some research because that's a great place to do it. And that's an overall goal of the whole organisation, where people like Chime come into this as well. We want to be able to be the first, in at least the first 5 places that people think about when they're thinking about doing research in Australia. So that's more of a longer term goal. We'll want to expand the actual facility as well to make it larger and allow us to provide services like phase 1 and 2, early phase 2 trials, which provide some really cutting edge sort of stuff like genetically modified organism, gene therapy, that sort of stuff. That'd be brilliant. So that's sort of our long and short term goals.
When will you be up and running? So you're saying the building will be in 6 months' time, so but there's a transition to there?
So the building will take that long, but the service already exists. So we are already helping people out with this sort of stuff already and establishing new units to conduct clinical trials. For example, I had a long conversation 2 weeks ago with the ophthalmology people about starting up ophthalmology clinical trials and also collaborations with other units, which will be an important part of the Costa Centre to promote cooperation between units. For example, mental health, going back to that again, we have a trial where ophthalmology will be cooperating with mental health to be able to produce a simple test that will hopefully be able to tell if someone has schizophrenia or not, just through an eye test. So that's a great example of units that might not have talked previously, and building on expertise from a well-established unit and also a new unit that hasn't done this sort of research before.
Paul, can you tell me the process of a clinical trial being approved? I know that Professor Michael Burke in the mental health field, there was, I think, one of his students was looking into mangosteen, the tropical fruit mangosteen, and its positive impact on patients with schizophrenia. How does it get from that idea or that theory into a clinical trial?
Okay, so that's a really big question you're talking about. So someone going from scratch starts up with an idea like your mangosteen. So then they have to do some sort of basic research. You can't just say, oh, I think mangosteens might do something. You have to actually have a scientific basis for it. So they might test what they think in mangosteens or identify a molecule in mangosteens that they think is going to actually do something, and go through the literature and speak with peers to decide whether or not that actually has any legs. Then they might establish some early work in a lab that shows something on, say, a cell line or something like that. And that might advance them to the point where they've actually got a candidate they think could become a drug in this particular case. Or maybe they're just going to use mangosteens themselves, I don't know. Then they have to design how they're going to answer that question scientifically. So use the scientific process to design a protocol or a method of testing their theory. Once they've established all that, they then take that design to their peers, get it cross-checked, yep, we're all good to go, and then they have to take it to an ethics committee to make sure that what they're doing is ethical and a good use of resources. They also have to establish some way of funding this as well. So that would be potentially a grant or a commercial sponsor or something like that. Once they've done all that and sent it off to an ethics committee, it then has to be checked again for good governance as well. And then you have to then set up, go to our unit and say, right, we've got this trial, we're ready to go, we'd like to start doing it, and you have to recruit participants to take part. And then run the actual trial, which might take, depending on how quickly you think the stuff would work, it might take a month, it might take 3 years. And then once you've done the trial, you write up your papers and your results, and you get them reviewed by other people who are independent to prove, to pick over it to prove whether or not it really does work. Once you've done all that, then you've got a new treatment to treat something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. I'm actually surprised it's mainly done sort of internally or locally. There's no overarching body in Australia or in other areas of the world which tick off approvals. It's because
Australia has a unique system where local ethics committees are given the power to do what larger bodies would do overseas, like central authorities. So if a local ethics committee approves something, then that is the federal government approval as well,
right,
or a tick-off. It's, the TGA calls it the clinical trial notification process. And that particular process is in the power of locally properly accredited ethics committees.
Okay, and then TGA come in at the end of that process?
No. So it's a notification process. So the ethics committee just notifies the TGA that this trial is taking place, and it happens.
Right.
There was an alternative system called the CTX program where you applied directly to the TGA, but I think there's only been 2 trials conducted that way in Australia in the last 10 years. And that's an enormously expensive method to go about things.
So it's mainly sort of the process is local. So getting back to the Adrian Costa Clinical Trials Centre, will this centre be just for Geelong and the benefits just for Geelong, or is it an area wider than that?
No, definitely not. We're looking at being a resource for all of the southwest and possibly all of Western Victoria. And even further than that, for example, I've had interest in a rare kidney disease study that we're talking about at the moment. And because we're potentially someone who can do it, the sponsor is talking about flying people in from all over Australia to come to Geelong to take part in this trial, which I'm sure Avalon Airport would be happy about. But it's it can be right across Australia. And I've done trials in the past where we've flown people from New Zealand, for example, to take part in trials as well.
Right, and then you've got international bodies. As I mentioned before, I know there was a trial of a COVID vaccine. I won't mention the name of the drug or the company, but that so you get internationals coming in looking for clinical trial centres to take on a trial.
Yeah. The process for getting a drug approved worldwide usually involves phase 3 and phase 4 trials. And those trials are worldwide trials conducted at many centres. So you might do that initial trial process I was talking about with your mangostines, and we do an early phase trial of this new mangosteen drug, and it says, yep, this works. But then before it's registered worldwide, usually the authorities say, well, we'd like you to do that trial again, except on a much larger scale. And that's a worldwide trial. So all of the ordinary drugs that everyone takes and gets approved on the PBS, they've usually gone through that sort of process. And they've been approved by the TGA in Australia, by the FDA in America, and the EMUA in Europe already, and various other authorities all around the world.
Right. So, Paul, will the centre just be for trials of new drugs?
No, definitely not. A clinical trial is any new intervention which might improve people's health. So it's not just drugs. It could be devices. It could be just a new treatment for something. For example, it might be whether or not a new type of surgery is the right way to go about something. So you would do the surgery or not do the surgery randomly and see what the outcomes were. That would be a clinical trial, if that makes sense. There's a device where one of the 10 trials that we're looking at the moment is a device which is built into glasses to detect people's seizures. And we want to see if that works. So it would be little sensors built into the glasses that detect eyelid and eye movements and be able to both count and detect if someone's having a seizure. Because when a lot of people have seizures, they don't know they've had them.
Right. If anyone's interested, how can you work with the centre?
Yep. So if you're interested at all in working with us, then please email me for the moment. At the moment, it's just me because, as I said, I've only been here 2 months, but we will be employing a bunch of people fairly soon. But at the moment, it's paul.lightfoot, which is LIGHTFOOT, at barwonhealth.org.au. Barwon Health is all one word.
Okay. Paul, just have you got any estimation of the number of staff that will work at the centre?
So the centre will be responsible for the coordination of a large part of the clinical trial research across Barwon Health, but the actual staff in the centre, I expect when we're finished, will be around about 20.
Right, okay.
Matt, can I say that, like, as an example, we're very keen to establish aged care dementia group for research because we feel there's a real area of unmet need for that. A disease like Alzheimer's currently has no actual standard treatment at all, and there are a lot of new therapies coming out at the moment. So that would be an example of an area that we will absolutely be wanting to establish, especially with the McKellar Centre, which is a fantastic facility that Geelong already has, and build on that.
We've got a couple of questions that have come through. One is how can we donate to the Adrian Costa Clinical Trials Centre? Well, that's through the foundation. Contact the foundation on 4215 8900. I'll send you all the participants an email, but also you can go to our website. But please give me a call if you'd like more information. We can discuss all the areas of support that can go towards the clinical trials centre. And I guess it can be very uplifting, in the areas that you work in, seeing the impact on people, improving their health and the positive impacts it has on their life and what they can achieve. So thank you, Paul, for that fascinating insight into all the work you're involved in. We're looking really forward to the opening of the Adrian Costa Clinical Trials Centre in about 6 months' time. This get-together today is not about asking for money, but it's evident we need philanthropy. We need trust and foundations. We need regular donations to invest in these areas, clinical trials, not only for the health outcomes, but to make sure we attract and we retain the very best people and the brightest minds in Geelong, people like Paul. Have a great day, everyone. We look forward to you joining us again in another Bowen Health Foundation Insight Series webinar soon. Have a great day.
I'm sure you're all as equally as excited as what we are here at the Bowen Health Foundation for what has already progressed towards the establishment of the Clinical Trials Centre in Adrian's name. We are so excited that the centre, even though it hasn't been fully established yet, is already attracting both national and international interest to bring new clinical trials here to our region. I'm also equally as excited to say that your generosity has too prompted others to give to clinical trials. So I thank you sincerely for your leadership in providing such generous support and advancement to clinical trials here in Greater Geelong. I look forward to the next update, the exciting update of when this centre will be soon open. Thank you and take care.